I think DMC4 is one of the most mixed games in this series to me because stuff like the gameplay I really do love, but other aspects kind of just feel like a step down, like pacing. And while I do understand the development was cut, I believe, by a year, I kind of feel that just makes the flaws stand out even more, mostly just because I do believe if they had an extra year or two in development, they could have made the game a whole lot better. But don't get me wrong, I don't hate the game, and even after playing games like DMC5 beforehand, that didn't really sour my experience of it. In a lot of ways, I feel the game still is a great update from DMC3, and I'm just going to start off with what I like first, and that definitely is the gameplay. A lot of it feels a lot more fluid, especially coming off the PS2 titles, and I feel the extra power of the PS3 and 360 really did help. But talking about Dante, stuff like being able to use all the styles at once is a nice upgrade since it allows fights to be a little bit cooler and have a little bit more depth, since now you can actually, swap on the fly and react more to the situation. And for Nero, he actually is a new character to the series, and I still think he has a decent amount of depth to him and still is really fun and fluid play. Stuff with like his rev sword and being able to time correct presses to get more damage, and his bust stone being able to pull in enemies and just do a really big attack is just really cool. And for Dante again, while he doesn't have numerous weapons like in DMC3, his kit is still pretty fun and I didn't really get bored playing as him. And on a similar topic to the gameplay, I enjoyed most of the bosses. The ones I actually ended up really liking has to be Burial, the one in the forest, which I'm not going to try to pronounce because I can't, but I'm just going to put the name up on screen, along with Angelo Credo and the final boss. I thought those ones again were pretty solid to fight. I also did end up liking Nero's Buster Arm because you can actually use that for a massive attack when the time is right, and for the most part none of the bosses really felt bullshit, as I mentioned, unless we're talking about the Savior, because frankly I feel like that's the only really bad boss in the game. I know there is that fight in the containment room, but honestly that's just a little bit of a time waster and not much else. The Savior to me is just straight up bad, and I rather take stuff like that over whatever DMC3 had, because there were at least like about 3 bosses I can think on top of my head that I just didn't really like. But regardless, this game does have some pretty solid bosses. I also do think the game looks great visually and still it holds up today. I'm playing the special edition on the PS4, and again at most I think it being at 1080p helps all the areas stand out really well. I also get really good vibes from each area, and I don't know how to explain it, but I just like, walking around in them, and my favorite areas definitely has to be the castle and Solar HQ. I know there isn't a whole lot of major areas in the game with a total of 4, I believe, but each map, I just really like going through it, and again, it makes me feel like, it's just not a generic location. And the next point is kind of limited to the special edition of the game, but there's a decent amount of playable characters in the game with really fun movesets. Virtual returns from DMC3, Trish returns from DMC2, and I believe she has some new moves. And same thing with Virgil, where, he does have a few moves, or a few extra ones, and you can actually also play as Lady, which I believe this is the only time she was playable. This definitely does help with replayability, since now you can change how you approach some of the bosses, because again everyone's so drastically different. And honestly, in a lot of ways the game really does feel like it could have reached a lot of the heights of DMC5 to me. While it's not all that bad of a game, it's still amazing in a lot of other ways. It's just, I feel again, if they had an extra year or two of development, they could have made a lot of the negative points not as bad. And one of those bad parts to me definitely has to be the pacing and the massive amount of backtracking you have to do. I feel most of the missions with Nero are pretty fun overall. It's just when you get to the middle part, you pretty much have to do all of that again and face most of Nero's bosses again, but with Dante. It ruins the pacing since nothing much relating to Nero happens throughout that time, and it really just felt forced because, for the most part, he's just stuck in the Savior for a really long time. I do kind of wish Dante and Nero had different campaigns, since I feel it would have helped the pacing and actually have made Nero's character a little bit more developed. Something else I thought was super annoying is that you actually have to fight the bosses, or at least most of them, 3 different times. And for me, if you have to fight them 3 different times, it's just way too much. And while I know DMC3 actually does have a boss rush mode at the end, I feel that game is way better paced than DMC4, and with this you really do again have to fight him once with Dante and twice with Nero, and that kind of does suck because, in the story, Nero doesn't destroy the gate, and Dante is the one that does that, and if Nero just destroyed the gate on the first try, we won't have to be dealing with this. By the third time, I pretty much just got tired of fighting them. But I don't think boss rushes are a terrible idea and concept, it's just in this case, it feels more like padding than anything else. This game also has a bunch of little annoyances, like for example, the characters in the special edition, they don't get any different missions, it's just the same ones as Nero's and Dante's. And then there's the fact that Dante is limited to 3 melee weapons and 3 guns, which does suck considering in DMC3 he had 5 of each. And while Dante is still fun to play in DMC4, I just like having more options for him. And as I mentioned, Nero's story gets cut short and he doesn't really have a lot of time just for him. Well, you do have 13 missions with Nero, the 7 with Dante doesn't really show anything with Nero, and by that point at the end of the game, it just rushes with him, and that really does suck. I really do wish there were more flashbacks with Nero and just, a little bit more with him, or at least 1 or 2 extra missions. So I hope I explained decently enough to why I find the game to be a mixed bag. While again, the gameplay and bosses and whatever else was really great, a lot of the other stuff just really doesn't really hold up as much as I mentioned. I still do think that, if they had more time to develop the game, a lot of this stuff would have been fixed. And I feel if they were to ever remake DMC4, I hope that they actually do fix up a lot of those issues if that ever comes, because in a lot of ways, to me, again, it feels like an early version of DMC5 since the gameplay is really well polished and it definitely has a nice step to the story. But I want to hear what you guys liked and disliked about this entry, and let me know in the comments below. And of course, I will go over my own likes and dislikes before the video ends. Likes, gameplay, most bosses are fun, game looks visually great, and I love playable characters in the special edition. Dislikes, bad pacing and a lot of backtracking, bosses are used as padding, characters don't get unique missions, Dante's weapons are limited, and Nero doesn't get a whole lot of time to develop. Thank you all for watching and see you guys later.